Starting at verse 9. Luke 18. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like the tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithe of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but he beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. If you look down, starting at verse 18, we'll read the first couple of verses there as well. The ruler asked him, Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother. He said, all of these things I've kept from my youth. When Jesus heard this, he said to him, One thing you still lack. Sell all that you have, distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. So this passage is another parable that Jesus taught. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the subject of what impresses God. To begin with, there was a man who showed up, a rebellious man who showed up to church one day, felt like it would be a good thing for business. So he gets up, he gets ready, and he goes to church. And as he's there, he decides he's going to join and become a member. First Sunday in church. Nobody knew him, and he didn't know the church. Come to find out, he was an adulterer, an alcoholic, and an all-around not great person. But when he went down to place his membership in the church, he gave public testimony to the church that there was no sin in his life, that he had grown up in the church, and they accepted him with open arms. When he went home, he decided to tell his wife exactly what had happened, and his wife was a very godly woman, and she ripped him a new one. Started telling him some of the things that he has done and how he went to the church and he lied about who he was. He ends up taking that to heart. So the next Sunday he went back to the church, walked down to the front again. This time he confessed to the church all of his sins. He told them he was dishonest, he was an alcoholic, he cheats on his wife, and that he was indeed sorry for telling them what he had said the week before. In that moment, they revoked his membership on the spot. And he says, as he was walking out of the church that day, he couldn't figure it out. He said, some people are different. I told them a lie and they took me in. I told them the truth and they kicked me out. And he was confused exactly by that. Now, here at the church, this is why we don't really allow people to consider membership for a little while. I mean, they can consider it all they want, but we don't actually give them an opportunity for membership until they've attended here for a while. We've had in the past some people who, come to church 2 or 3 times and say, I want to be a member. Well, the reality is you don't really know us, and we don't know you. And so that's why we do what we do. And then a lot of churches just accept people into membership. Because if you're a part of a denomination, the more members you have, the more votes you get, the more say you have with your denomination and all that stuff. So some churches really have no requirement. As a matter of fact, I found it really interesting. Sarah might not even really know this. I was the first pastor at our previous church to require a membership class. Quite interesting. I just feel like you need to know us, right? You need to know what we stand for. You need to know who we are, what our beliefs are. Because the reality is, if you show up, you're not going to get to really know us for a while. It's not like you're going to be able to come and just know everything that we believe. Even if we're a part of a denomination, there may be differences in philosophy and all of that stuff. So that's kind of why we do it. But we're talking about the topic of what impresses God. And Jesus tells this story of two men in this type of a situation that had two totally different results. One man tried to talk himself into the kingdom, and the other one really was trying to talk himself out of the kingdom. One believed because of what he is and who he was that he deserved it. The other one didn't think he deserved it at all. So that's where we find ourselves, Luke 18. It makes it plain here in verse 9 exactly who he's talking about. He says, he told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. So let's consider this for a minute. Who do you think Jesus is actually giving this parable to? Pharisees. Those are more than likely the people that are present, because they were the ones who thought highly of themselves and looked at everybody else with contempt. Why they didn't just say Jesus was standing before a bunch of Pharisees, I don't know. But that's more than likely who he's referring to here. Now, a parable is for everyone, but in this moment, as he's teaching this, it's got to be before some of these religious leaders. But the reality is, like even Karen had mentioned, it's for everyone. There is something that we can get out of it, and the truth is, maybe we're asking ourselves, are we a part of who he's speaking of? Well, if we've ever looked down on someone who doesn't go to church, we're a part of the parable. If we've ever thought ourselves better than somebody else, we're in the parable. If we look at people who were in prison and think that we're better than them because of where they are, we're in this parable. If we've looked at people who are divorced and think that we're better than them because we're not, we're in this parable. If we look down our nose at anybody for any reason, Jesus is talking about us. That's kind of how a parable works. And the reality is, if we look deep enough, we will find ourselves somewhere in what he's referring to here. So we're talking about this topic of what impresses God. And the first thing, there's just two. So the first thing is we impress God when we're actually not trying. When we're not trying. Verses 10 through 12. He says, 2 men went up into the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithe of all that I get. He is one who is trying to impress God. Maybe some of the things he was doing were legitimate. Maybe this is intentional. He's purposeful with doing what he does. But in reality, even based on this prayer, he is trying to impress God with what he does. And, the truth is, immediately we kind of want to jump all over him for it. He's, to say the least, a bit arrogant. This was very common of the Pharisees. Arrogance. Looking down on other people. Quite honestly, if you're looking at him in regards to being a Pharisee, he's an Eagle Scout. In their eyes, that's what Pharisees were. They dotted every I. They crossed every theological T. They were strictly by the book. They did, I believe, the Pharisees had a heart for religion. But I don't think their religion had any heart. I think that's the difference. I think that's the struggle that they found themselves in, and that's the struggle that he finds himself in. He was brought up in this. This is what he was used to. And so we get here and we begin to read about these two different people, the Pharisee and the tax collector. And it says here, the Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed this. As some people say that, in this exact story that Jesus is giving, he's more than likely in the inner courts, right in the center of the temple. He's the one that's praying. We talk about this when we talk about the Lord's Prayer. Jesus gives some expectations when people pray, right? Make sure that you're not finding yourself in the center so that people see you, because when you do that, you're looking for them to see you as, look at that holy person. Look at them. They must be a really good person because they're praying. And that's what some of the people would do in these days. When the calls for prayer would come, they would walk in and they would find themselves in the center of the street. Oh, wherever the music starts, I now have to pray. So I'm going to pray in the middle of the street. People are going to see me. I've given this example, so I would tell you if you've heard it before, then stop me, but don't stop me. We were in Israel, and we were at what is called the Wailing Wall. It's the Western Wall in Israel, in Jerusalem. And it's terrible, but there are 3 different portions of the Western Wall. There's a men's portion, a women's portion, and a Muslim portion. They had to create this ramp that goes over the wall to the outside because the Muslims required to have a place at this holy location. Anyways, the women's side, if I remember right, Sarah, was fairly small. It was not a very big section of the wall, and it was only women. On the men's side, it was very significant. Also on the men's side was a little cave at the end of the wall where they would keep some of the scrolls. And 3 times a day, one of their rabbis would come down, go into this cave, get one of the scrolls, bring it out, and he would read from it while the other Jews were coming to pray. And if you've never seen, I should have had a video that we could pull up. If you've never seen a Jew pray, they pray from a book and they move. They don't just stand and pray. Their prayers are almost sung. And so the entire time, when you walk up and you go to this Western Wall, you've got people, their big thing is reaching out. You want to be able to reach out and touch the wall. That's the holy of the holies to them. And so they'll go and they'll touch the wall, and then they'll back away. They'll get this book, and they'll start singing their prayer, and they're literally just going like this the whole time. And I'm standing there, back away from the wall, and I'm looking at all of these Jews who are doing this. And then all of a sudden, I heard a man screaming his prayers. You want to know what probably, I would say more than that, probably 50%. You know what 50% of the people did when they started to hear him screaming? Looked for him. And immediately, these kind of lessons made complete sense to me. Here, this man who was screaming his prayers was not outside at the wall. He was in the cave in the back corner, screaming his prayers louder than everybody else. And as soon as I heard it, it just made sense. That is the type of person that Jesus is talking about. Don't pray to be seen. Don't pray to be heard by others. That's the person that he's talking about. Here, the Pharisee He's not standing off. He's not far away. He's in the center. He's in the middle of everything that's going on. The person that I heard was exactly what Jesus is talking about. Made complete sense to me. I didn't need someone to come up to me and make that clear. As soon as I heard it, I knew. So this man in Luke 18, Jesus, as he's presenting this parable, he says he's basically standing in the center because this is where he could be heard and seen the clearest. And his prayer was not quiet. Even as you begin to read, as they begin to describe this, standing by himself, he prayed these words. I really think it's quite interesting that he begins to explain to God who he is not and who he is. I thank God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. This one over here. Thank you for not making me him. Thank you for not making me like him. And then he goes on to begin to give his resume. I fast twice a week. Anybody know, according to the Old Testament, how many times a year fasting was required? Anybody have any idea? Okay, I heard someone say 5. Anybody know? JW's up there saying 4. 1 time a year, the Day of Atonement, fasting was required. Any of the other feasts, it was optional. You could voluntarily fast. But it was a requirement one day out of the year. So the man stands up and he says, I fast twice a week. God, look at me. I'm fasting 103 times a year more than you require me to fast. Is there anything wrong with fasting 104 times a year? No. But when you begin to use it as a part of your resume, there's an issue. Again, when we begin talking about fasting, there's a difference between fasting for health and fasting spiritually. Okay? I just want to make sure that you're aware of that that's clear. There are a lot of people who fast for health. I don't care how often you fast. I don't care how often you fast spiritually. But if you're going to fast spiritually, you don't make it between you and 85 other people. You don't go to social media and say, I fasted today, and I'm going to fast tomorrow, and I'm going to fast the next day. If you're doing it for health, whatever. But spiritually, it's a moment where it's you and God. You're replacing something with God. You're replacing, most people fast meals, so you're replacing a meal with some sort of prayer. In the Old Testament, in these days, it was required that a Jew would fast 1 day a year on the Day of Atonement. Anybody know about tithing? What was the requirement of tithing?
10% of the first fruit.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah. What does he say he tithed on? I give tithes of what? All. Everything. Not just his first fruits. Not just his income. God, you need to realize I fast 103 times more a year than you tell me, and I give more than double what you tell me. Adding to his resume. He's a double tither. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. But as you're doing this for your own sake, that becomes a problem. And so Jesus is bringing this out. And what we find out about this man is that he thought, even back then, he was thinking in that moment that his goodness would gain brownie points with God. He thought that God would accept a person based on what they do for him. In other words, he believed in good works. God, I'm doing all this good stuff for you. You better do something in return for me. He was a religious man and he was proud of it. But the reality is, if you put your trust in anything, whether it's church membership or attendance or baptism or religion or good works, anything at all other than Jesus Christ himself to make God accept you, you're just fooling yourself. It's not how it works. We aren't going to pay ourselves into eternity. Sorry, Catholic Church has it wrong. We're not going to be able to pay ourselves in. We can't just say we're a good person and a good person is worth double the points. It's nothing about that. The Pharisee thought God would be impressed with all that he was doing. And that's the first clue that we get here about God. We impress God when we're simply doing what God commands. When it just becomes a part of who we are. Not a box on a resume. I heard about a 5th grader that came home really excited from school one day. She was voted prettiest girl in the class. Before she starts celebrating, no, it was not my sister. Just so you know. The next day she came home, and she was even more excited because she was now voted the most likely to succeed in her class. The 3rd day of the week, she came home and she told her mother that she won a 3rd contest, and it was the best one yet, most popular. The first 3 days of this week, the girl was ecstatic because she was winning absolutely everything. Well, on Friday, she came home from school and she was extremely upset. When she walked in the door, her mother said, "What happened? Did you lose this time?" She said, "Oh no, I won the vote again." The mother said, "Well, what's wrong?" She said, "Well, I was voted the most stuck up." The Pharisee would have won that contest hands down. The Pharisee had an eye problem. Look at it. Look at just these 2 verses. Verses 10 through 12. Count with me how many times he refers to himself or I. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, "God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give half of the tithe that I get." How many times? He's got a bit of an eye problem, doesn't he? It's actually 5. The last one, I get. Right? There's an eye problem here. He's all about himself. If you will, he was stoned on the drug of self. He suffered from 2 problems, inflation and deflation. Inflated view of himself, deflated view of God. However you want to put it. He wasn't about fulfilling the will of God. He was about fulfilling the law. He was about completing the task that was set before him. As my dad would say, well, he says it a little differently. My dad actually says his eyes are too close apart. But this man, he couldn't see because his eyes were too close together. It was all about him, even his prayer. C.S. Lewis once said, "A proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you were looking down, you can't see what's above." The Pharisee had fooled himself about himself. God, thank you for not making me like other men. Especially this tax collector. Thank you for making me so much better than anyone else around me. Thank you for making me more spiritual, more holy. Thank you for not making me like other men. And yet, he was just like other men. Because Scripture tells us that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Not some, all. There was a man on trial. He was being charged for burglary. And as he was standing there before the judge said, "You have two options. You can have me try your case, or you can have your case tried before a panel of jurors." And he said, "The jurors will be a jury of your peers." The man thought for a moment, and he said, "Your Honor, what are peers?" The judge said, "Well, they're people just like you." The defendant put his head down, and he goes, "Forget it, I don't want no thieves trying me." You'll have no idea how he got charged. Verse 11, here, says the Pharisee standing by himself. Standing, some translations say standing afar. I'm sorry, standing close to himself, but it also says that he prayed. Standing by himself, he prayed. Some translations say that he prayed thus with himself. The original Greek manuscript actually says he stood and he prayed to himself. Unfortunately, when this is your prayer, that's what you're doing. You're praying to yourself. When we approach God with pride, that's what we do. Prideful prayer is nothing more than an echo in your own ear. Secondly, humility impresses God. We contrast that. Jesus does a great job here of contrasting. And I love it because the Pharisee, the one who everyone looks up to religiously, is the one who he's actually talking down about. The one who everyone hated and despised, being a tax collector, is the one who he is praising in this account that he gives. And there's a stark contrast between the two. The tax collectors were the scum of Jewish society. They were the IRS to the Roman government. They charged exorbitant rates. They skimmed money off the top. They would steal candy from a baby and welfare checks from their own mother, if they had welfare checks. That's just who they were. They were considered the traitors to the nation of Israel. They were so despised that they couldn't hold public office or even give testimony in Jewish court. Think about that. The tax collector was to the Pharisee what an outlaw is to the sheriff. No doubt he was a bad guy because of what he did. He knew it, and everyone else knew it. But at this point, this is where the parable begins to kind of take a strange twist. Because the Pharisee is praying and he's giving his resume and he's trying to impress God with all of the religious things, all of the godly things that he does. He's really self-promoting here. And then you get to this tax collector who surely everyone hated. And he wasn't trying to impress God at all. He just came to him with a humble heart. God, this is who I am. I do a lot of bad things. I'm standing away from everybody because nobody wants to be close to me. God, would you be merciful to me because I am a sinner. Humility impresses God. It's a huge difference between the two. Because the tax collector was as humble as the Pharisee was prideful. God, this is who I am. I've made these mistakes. And we can tell that there was humility in his heart based on simply where he was standing. He was standing a ways off. He couldn't look his head up. He was hitting his chest. This is who I am. This is what I have done. You could probably, if you were standing next to him, you probably could see the humility in his eyes. He wouldn't even raise his eyes to heaven. I'm not worthy enough to look up. The Pharisee was too proud to look up. The tax collector was too ashamed to look up. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Verse 14. Jesus has given this scenario to those that were with him. And assuredly, the Pharisees, at this point, as they're hearing this parable from Jesus, I would imagine they're immediately thinking to themselves, well, it's the Pharisee who is right. It's the Pharisee who's got everything correct. But Jesus says, I tell you, this man, the tax collector, went down to his house justified. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. I think a highway to heaven is paved with humility. Now, on the outside, the world's not going to see it that way. The world's going to look at this and they're going to feel in their own mind that the Pharisee was much closer to God than this tax collector ever could have been. But in reality, it was a tax collector who was closer. Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. What impressed God about this man, who I'm sure was a thief, was that he was willing to humble himself before God. It kind of struck me as I was reading through Luke 18. I think there's probably only one thing worse than being a sinner. And that's not admitting that you are one. There are a lot of people in this world who will not admit that they're a sinner. We have to admit it. If we don't know Christ as our Savior, we have to admit it. We're not going to accept Him until we can. It's even worse than being a sinner itself. Look at the end of this. I've already read it. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. God, through Jesus, He draws a conclusion from this story that literally shocked His listeners. The Pharisees were the ones that wore the white hats. The tax collectors were the ones that wore the black hats. If you had to take a vote amongst the crowd, it would definitely be the Pharisee who was the one closer. He would be the one who was safely secure in the kingdom of God. He was the one that everyone would look to. But it wasn't their vote that mattered. It was God's. And ultimately, when it comes down to even our own life, it's not the view of somebody else. It's not whether or not Mike Crotty thinks that you're a religious person, or Steve, or Tim. It's not at all about whether somebody else thinks that you are. It's all about how God sees you. That's what matters. And that's the point that he's making here. And I think one of the things we need to learn is, especially from this parable, is that it's not important how we even see ourselves. It's only important how God does. Sure, we talk about that when it comes to, when it comes to being rejected by society or not living up to what society says or all of that stuff. I'll tell you right now, I mean, I'm 37 and I wouldn't want to go back to being 16. I wouldn't want to have to live with the pressures that these kids have in front of them all the time. It's just amazing to me that we have never been more connected technologically than we are now, but we've also never been more empty and more isolated than we are now. And yet, you've got Facebook, which is, I'll be honest with you, Facebook is kind of more on the out now. You've got all of these other social media platforms. You've got X, which was Twitter. You've got Instagram. You've got TikTok. You've got all of these different things and different modes of communication and different ways of reaching people. And it has so many positive things, but man, these kids are being thrown into the wolves' den so early in life. I wouldn't go back to that if I could. But it's not about how we see ourselves. We refer to that when we talk about those things. We oftentimes don't refer to it being not how we see ourselves, but how God sees us when something has gone well for us, right? Or we've done something good. But that's true. That's still true. It isn't about how I see myself. It isn't about how you see me. It isn't about how you see yourself or how I see you. It's exactly how God sees you. That's the important thing. And I think the second thing that we can learn from this is that mercy is something we can't earn or pay for. It's given freely by God. Only those who have admitted that they need mercy are the ones who have received it. Many years ago, a man had conned his way into the orchestra of the Emperor of China. The only thing was, he couldn't sing or play an instrument. I'm no musician, but I'm pretty sure it'd be caught pretty quickly. Whenever the group practiced or they performed, he would just hold his instrument up to his mouth and he would pretend to play, but he wouldn't make a sound. For years, he received a good salary and he enjoyed comfortable living in China. Then, one day, the emperor requested a solo from each musician. He got a little nervous because there wasn't enough time to learn how to play the instrument. So he pretended to be sick. But the royal physician wasn't fooled. On the day of his solo performance, the impostor took poison and he killed himself. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, he refused to face the music. Have you ever heard that? From what I've read, that's actually where it comes from. This man refused to face the music. The way to impress God is to face the music. Recognize who you are in Him. Recognize that He is the only way to heaven. And when we realize that, and that we have nothing outside of our relationship with Christ, we begin to impress God. Why don't you stand with me?